You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. I stood in the doorway of the apartment, heart racing, palms clammy. It had only been a few days since I last saw Claire, but the absence of her presence in the apartment had weighed on me every minute. Tonight, I had come to settle things. I didn't expect to find what I did. Claire was sitting on the couch, her arms wrapped tightly around Tony. He was laughing at something she said, that laugh that used to belong to me. Her head rested on his shoulder, and for a moment, I felt the urge to leave, to walk away and let them have this perfect little life together. But something in me snapped. I couldn't do it, not without a fight. Claire, I said her name, my voice a little hoarser than I intended, my anger bubbling up. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide in surprise, before quickly hardening. She pushed herself off of Tony, giving him a look that told him to stay put. Tony? He had the nerve to look at me with that smug smile, the same smile he wore when we used to joke about our plans, our future. It made my blood boil. I wanted to rip it off his face. "You need to leave," Claire said, her tone cold. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. "I don't think you understand," I growled, taking a step forward. "I'm not leaving until we talk about this." "Talk about what?" Tony piped up, standing up now, a little too casually. I glared at him. "You think you can just waltz in here and—" "Jack, stop!" Claire's voice was sharp. "I'm done with this. Done with you. Tony and I—" My heart was hammering in my chest, the frustration and betrayal clouding my vision. "Done with me?" I laughed, but it came out bitter. "Is that what this is? You're done with me?" She stepped back, her expression tight, eyes flickering toward Tony, as if to silently ask for support. That was all I needed to see. In one swift movement, I crossed the room. My hand shot out, grabbing Tony's arm and twisting it sharply before shoving him back, the sudden motion making him stumble with a pained expression. His face went pale in an instant, the pain registering too late. He yelled, loud and panicked, the sound grating against my ears. "You're crazy! What the hell is wrong with you?" I let go of his arm, pushing him away from me. "You're not welcome here," I spat, turning to Claire, whose face had gone from shocked to furious. "How dare you!" she yelled, rushing over to Tony, who was cradling his arm, looking up at me like I was some sort of monster. "You're a monster, Jack." Monster? The word hit me like a punch. My breath came in harsh gasps, my fists still clenched at my sides. I had tried. I had given her everything, and this was what I got in return. "Claire, I started, but she cut me off. "No, Jack, you need to leave. I'm done with this. With you." Her voice trembled, a mixture of anger and disgust that I could barely stomach. And just like that, she had chosen him. She stood there, holding Tony's uninjured arm, supporting him, making him out to be the victim. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her, to make her see what she was doing, but I couldn't. She had already made her choice. It was as if all the years, all the love we shared meant nothing. The sound of sirens filled the air. I didn't even hear them approach, but I knew it was too late. Claire had already called the cops. As I stood there, watching her nurse Tony's arm, I felt a bitter knot twist in my stomach. How had it come to this? I was supposed to be the one she turned to, the one she needed. Instead, she was treating me like a criminal. I stepped back slowly, my heart heavy with disbelief. The officers arrived, their uniforms stiff and formal. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. The look on Claire's face was enough. Tony's pitiful glare didn't help. "Jack, step aside," one of the officers said, his voice flat as he gestured for me to move. I wanted to fight it, to say something, anything, but all I could manage was a frustrated grunt. I looked at Claire one last time. She didn't even look at me. Her back turned as she checked on Tony, whispering apologies to him. They arrested me, and as they led me out of the apartment, I watched Claire through the door. She was holding him, comforting him, the man who had taken everything from me, and it felt like a knife in my chest. As I was pushed into the back of the squad car, I couldn't believe what had just happened, the betrayal, the abandonment. I had thought I was walking into a confrontation to fix things, but instead, I'd walked into a nightmare. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly alone. The cold metal chair was uncomfortable against my back, and the fluorescent lights above buzzed incessantly, adding to the tension in the room. I sat there, my hands cuffed in front of me, staring at the white walls, willing the noise in my head to quiet down. The room smelled sterile, but it did nothing to clear the thick fog that had settled over me since the moment the officers had cuffed me and thrown me in the back of their car. I should have seen this coming, but somehow, in the moment, it felt like a bad dream. I kept replaying the look on Claire's face, the way she had turned to Tony in that moment, the way she had completely sided with him, as if I wasn't even there. I snapped out of my thoughts when the door opened. A uniformed officer walked in, clipboard in hand, his face hard and unreadable. He was tall, built like someone who had spent years working the streets, and he had a no-nonsense air about him that made me uneasy. "Jack Miller?" the officer asked, his tone flat as he set the clipboard down on the table. I nodded. "Yeah, that's me." "All right, let's talk," he said, pulling out a chair and sitting across from me. He didn't offer a handshake. I wasn't sure if I would have taken it if he had. Instead, he flipped open his clipboard and glanced at a few papers. Tony's filed charges, assault, claims you attacked him without provocation. He says you came in, started shouting, and when he tried to get away, you broke his arm in a fit of rage. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. I was still processing the fact that I was here, sitting in an interrogation room, being treated like a criminal. The officer's eyes never left me as he waited for a response. I was supposed to deny it, right? Say something about how it wasn't what it seemed, that Claire had twisted the story, but I couldn't. That wasn't what had happened, not exactly. "Did you?" the officer pressed. "I didn't attack him," I finally said, my voice rough and tired. He was in my face talking to me like he had some right to be there. I didn't break his arm on purpose. The officer raised an eyebrow. "But you did break his arm?" "Yeah, I did. But it wasn't intentional. It was..." I stopped myself. My mind was still racing, and no matter how much I tried to put my thoughts together, the truth felt like it was slipping away from me. "Self-defense?" he suggested, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Was he threatening you?" "No," I said, shaking my head. I snapped, okay? I saw her with him, and it just hit me. The betrayal. I don't know what happened. I wasn't thinking. I just acted." The officer nodded, scribbling something down. "You're saying it was an accident then? That you weren't trying to hurt him?" "Yeah, I didn't mean to hurt him," I muttered. "I wasn't thinking straight. I just saw him, and I lost it. But I didn't plan on doing that." He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms, his expression unreadable. "I'm sure you didn't. But here's the thing, Jack. This is a serious charge. Tony's not just saying this for fun. Anne Claire's backing him up. She says you came into the apartment, and when you saw them together, you lost it and attacked him." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Claire. Of course she was backing him up. Of course she was protecting him. The man she had chosen over me. It didn't matter how much I had done for her, how much I had tried to give her. In that moment, I wasn't the man she wanted. I was just the angry ex who didn't fit into her perfect little life anymore. I didn't mean for any of this to happen," I said, my voice quieter now. The words felt like they were choking me. "I loved her, and I don't know how things got this far." The officer didn't respond at first. He just stared at me for a long moment, before picking up his pen again and writing something down. "I think you should get a lawyer. This isn't something we can just let slide. You've got a serious situation on your hands. Tony's got witnesses, and Claire's statements are going to make this worse for you." I didn't respond. What was I supposed to say? "You're right, I need a lawyer?" I didn't even know where to start. As the officer stood up and moved to the door, he glanced back at me. "You're in a lot of trouble here, Jack. This is serious. Don't make it worse." The door clicked shut behind him, and I was left alone with my thoughts. The weight of it all hit me then. The police, the accusations, the realization that my life, as I knew it, was spiraling out of control. I had always been the one to keep things together, the one who was reliable, who provided. But now, I was nothing. I was a man with nothing but shattered pride and regret. And Claire? She wasn't coming back. Not now, not ever. She was gone, leaving me with nothing but the consequences of my own actions. The silence in the room felt suffocating. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall, reminding me just how much time I had wasted. I had no idea what came next, but I knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning, and somehow, I was going to have to find a way out of it. I sat at the kitchen table. the glow of my phone illuminating my face in the otherwise dark apartment. It had been a few days since the confrontation, and I had been replaying the events over and over in my mind. The police, the arrest, Claire's coldness as they took me away. It all felt like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. But tonight, I was going to face it. I had to face it. I couldn't move forward without knowing the full truth, and something deep inside told me there was more to this whole mess than I had realized. Claire's phone had always been somewhat of a mystery to me. It wasn't that I didn't trust her, but I couldn't help but notice the way she would always hide her screen when I walked into the room, or how she'd get nervous when I asked who she was texting. It was small things, but in the back of my mind, it made me uneasy. I had promised myself I wouldn't go snooping, that I wouldn't dig into her privacy, but that night, I was desperate. I needed answers. I needed to understand what had happened to the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had trusted with everything. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, Claire's screen unlocked from the last time I'd held it. I hesitated for just a moment, but then I started scrolling through her messages. At first, it was just the usual, texts from her friends, updates about work, some casual conversations. Nothing alarming. But then I found them, the messages between Claire and Tony. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I stared at the screen in disbelief as the words seemed to jump off the page, each one more painful than the last. The flirtation, the intimacy, the way she spoke to him, like he was the center of her world. I miss you so much, Tony. Can't wait to see you tonight. I feel so alive when I'm with you. I can't stop thinking about you. When can we make it happen again? The words blurred as I read them over and over again. It felt like the floor had dropped out beneath me. Claire. My Claire. The woman I had loved, the woman I had stood by, had been seeing him behind my back. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed. This wasn't the woman I had known. This wasn't the person I had shared my life with. I scrolled further, and it didn't stop. More texts, plans to meet up, moments of laughter, private jokes. She had been having an affair with Tony for who knew how long. And it wasn't just the messages. I found pictures, explicit ones, Claire and Tony in ways I never imagined. I felt bile rise in my throat as I stared at the images, my mind racing with the cruel realization that while I had been sitting at home, thinking everything was fine, she had been giving him pieces of her that I thought were mine. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? Had I really been that stupid, that naive? I stood up, pacing the room. I could feel the heat of anger rising inside me, mixing with the intense ache in my chest. How could she? How could she do this to me? I sat back down, staring at the phone in my hands. I knew I should have confronted her immediately, demanded the truth, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I had something more than just her words. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I stared at the screen again, and then it hit me. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about me, about reclaiming my dignity, about finding some semblance of justice in the wreckage of everything I had thought was real. In a moment of sudden clarity, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just sit around and let her walk all over me. I was going to confront her, but this time, I was going to be armed with the truth. I took a deep breath and started typing a message. It wasn't to Claire, though. It was to Tony. We need to talk. Now. I didn't expect a quick response, but I knew it was coming. I had to face him. He wasn't just some guy she had an affair with. He was the man who had helped tear everything I loved apart. I placed the phone down on the table, the weight of what I had just discovered sinking in. This was the point of no return. There was no going back to the way things were. I wasn't sure what I would do next, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let Claire and Tony get away with this. Not without a fight. This wasn't just about a relationship anymore. This was about my future, my pride, and my ability to stand up for myself, even when it felt like the world was falling apart. I just didn't know how much more of this pain I could take. I stood outside Tony's apartment, my fists clenched, my stomach twisting in a knot. The decision to confront him had felt necessary. But now that I was standing here, facing the building where he and Claire had been hiding their affair, I couldn't shake the sense of dread that was creeping up on me. This wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. I knew that. Hell, I was prepared for it to get ugly. But I wasn't sure I was prepared for how much it would hurt to see the man Claire had chosen over me. To hear the words that would come out of his mouth. To face the reality of everything I'd lost. I took a deep breath, forcing the tension out of my shoulders, and pushed the door open. The hallway was dimly lit, the walls peeling in places, but it was quiet, too quiet. I knocked on his door, the sound echoing in the otherwise still space. Seconds passed, then a muffled voice. "Who is it?" "It's Jack," I replied, my voice cold, sharp. "We need to talk." There was a pause, a moment of hesitation, before I heard the sound of footsteps approaching. The door swung open, and there he was. Tony. He was standing in front of me, dressed in a black t-shirt and jeans, his posture relaxed like he didn't have a care in the world. His eyes flickered to me, and for a moment I saw a flash of recognition, a brief flicker of fear, quickly masked by a smug, arrogant smile. "You came all the way here just to talk?" he asked, his voice dripping with mockery. "I didn't think you'd be so civil." "I'm not here for pleasantries," I shot back. "I'm here to get some answers." Tony stepped aside, a smirk still playing at the edges of his lips. "Well, come in then," he said, gesturing toward the living room, as if he was inviting me into his home like it was any other day. I hesitated for a second, but then pushed past him, entering the dimly lit apartment. It was sparse, minimalistic. Everything seemed to scream temporary. No photos, no personal touches. Just a few pieces of furniture scattered around, and a flat-screen TV mounted to the wall. It was as if Tony was only halfway invested in his own life. I turned to face him, my chest tight. "You and Claire," I said, forcing the words out through gritted teeth. "How long has this been going on?" Tony's eyes met mine, and he leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "Oh, come on, Jack. You're not stupid. You've known. You just didn't want to see it." My blood boiled at his casual tone, at how little regard he had for the wreckage he had caused. "I didn't want to see it?" I repeated, incredulous. "You're the one who's been sneaking around behind my back with my fiancé. You're the one who decided to destroy everything I had." Tony chuckled, shaking his head. "Destroy everything? You were never going to keep her. She was bored of you. You could see it in her eyes. She's always been the kind of woman who needs excitement. You, Jack, you were just safe." His words hit like a punch to the gut. Bored of me. Safe. The weight of his words hung in the air, and for a moment I could hardly breathe. Was that what she had really thought of me? That I wasn't enough for her? I fought to keep my emotions in check, but my fists clenched at my sides. "You don't get to talk about her like that," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You don't know a damn thing about her." "I know enough," Tony replied smoothly. "I know she was craving something more than you could give her. And when someone's ready to take the plunge, they don't just let it go. They act on it." I didn't want to believe him. I didn't want to hear him tell me that my worst fears were true. But deep down, I could feel the sting of his words sinking in. Was that really it? Was Claire that disillusioned with me that she had to turn to someone like Tony for whatever it was she had been missing? "Do you even care about her?" I asked, my voice shaking despite myself. Tony's face softened for a split second, his smugness faltering. But then he shrugged, that same arrogant grin returning. "I care about what she can give me, and she's something else. I don't think you could have ever given her that." I couldn't stop the bitter laugh that escaped my lips. "You think you're so special, don't you? What exactly do you think you've won here, Tony? She's walking away from you, just like she walked away from me, and for good reason." Tony's eyes narrowed at my words, and for a moment I thought I might have hit a nerve. But then he just laughed, that same cocky laugh that had infuriated me from the very beginning. "You think she's going to walk away from me, Jack?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping low. "She's with me now, and I'm not going anywhere." The words hit me like a slap across the face, and I had to force myself to stand tall. "You're nothing but a liar and a coward. You've been using her just like you've been using everyone else. And when this blows up in your face, when you realize she's not what you thought she was, don't come crawling back to me." Tony stepped back, his smirk returning. But there was something darker in his eyes now, something that told me this wasn't over. He knew, like I did, that things weren't as simple as they seemed. "I don't need you, Jack," he said, voice hardening. "But if you think you've won this, if you think you've got anything left, you're mistaken. You're out of her life now, and you won't be coming back in." My chest felt tight as I met his gaze. He was right. This was the end. But it wasn't just the end of Claire and me. It was the end of a life I thought I understood. The end of everything I thought I knew. I don't need her either, I said, finally finding my voice again. But I'll make sure you regret ever stepping into my life. As I turned to leave, I heard him call out behind me. Don't say I didn't warn you, Jack. The door slammed shut behind me as I stepped out into the cold night, my heart still pounding in my chest. But I knew this wasn't over. It wasn't just about Claire or Tony anymore. This was about me taking control of my life again, and I was done being anyone's fool. The next few days felt like a blur. My mind was still reeling from everything: Claire's betrayal, Tony's smugness, and the crushing realization that my entire world had been turned upside down in a matter of days. But as much as I wanted to retreat, to sink into the numbness that threatened to consume me, I knew I couldn't. Not anymore. I had to take action. I had to do something that put me back in control, even if just for a moment. I made the call to a lawyer, a reputable one who specialized in family law. I didn't even know what my options were, but I needed advice, someone who could tell me what my next move was. The weight of the situation was crushing, but there was one thing I knew for sure. I wasn't going to let Claire or Tony win without a fight. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Angela, was calm and professional, her voice steady as she walked me through the legal steps. It didn't take long for her to make one thing clear. I was in for a long, complicated battle. You need to understand, Jack, she said, her tone no nonsense. This isn't just about a broken relationship. Tony's involved now, and depending on how much Claire's involved with him, this could get messy. It could get ugly. You need to be prepared for that. I exhaled, trying to steady myself. I'm ready, I said, even though I didn't feel like it. I just need to know what I can do. I can't just sit here and let them walk all over me. Angela paused. You're not going to let that happen, but you have to be strategic. First things first, we're going to start by filing for divorce. The second thing, we're going to secure your assets. If Claire's been living with Tony, that's a huge red flag. We need to make sure you're protected legally. Divorce? The word sounded foreign, even though I knew that's what this was. I thought we'd work it out, that we'd find a way to fix things. But as I sat there, the full weight of it all hit me. Claire had already chosen, and so had I. Yeah, Angela said, her voice firm. We're moving forward. The sooner we get paperwork filed, the sooner you can start to rebuild. It was strange. I had spent years building my life, my career, my relationship with Claire, and now I was sitting on the phone, preparing to dismantle it all, one legal document at a time. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and gathering evidence. Angela was thorough. She helped me gather everything I could, including text messages, financial records, and even photos from my phone. We were building a case, piece by piece, but nothing hit harder than the day the divorce papers were officially filed. I was sitting in my apartment, staring at the empty space where Claire's things used to be. It still didn't feel real, even though I knew it was, even though I had no choice but to face it head on. My phone buzzed, and I glanced down at the screen. It was Claire. I stared at her name for a long moment, unsure of whether to answer. My heart was still bruised from everything, but I knew I couldn't avoid this forever. So I tapped the screen and answered. Jack, we need to talk, she said, her voice low, hesitant. There was a crack in her usual calm demeanor, something I hadn't heard in her voice in weeks. What do you want, Claire? I asked, my voice colder than I intended. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't help it. The anger, the hurt, it was still raw. I want to explain. I know you're angry, but please, just let me explain what happened, she said, her voice wavering. I took a deep breath, staring at the wall in front of me. She wanted to explain? After everything? After Tony? After the betrayal? I'm done explaining, I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts. There's nothing left to say. There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost hear the tears in her voice when she finally spoke again. I never meant for it to hurt you, Jack, but I was so lost. I don't know what happened between us. No, Claire, I interrupted. You don't get to do this. You don't get to use that excuse. You don't get to say you were lost. I was here. I gave you everything I had, but you chose him. You chose Tony, and I'm done. There was silence on the other end, and I could hear her breathing, trying to hold herself together. But I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't be her fallback. I couldn't be the one she turned to when things with Tony went wrong. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She had already said everything she needed to say by walking away. I've filed for divorce, I added, feeling the weight of the words sink in. It's over, Claire. There was no response, no attempt to stop me, no pleading. Just silence. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. I didn't feel relief or anger or sadness anymore. I just felt empty. The closure I had been hoping for didn't come from her apology or the call itself. It came from finally taking control, finally taking the first step toward healing. Goodbye, Claire, I said, my voice steady now. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I hung up before she could say anything more. The phone dropped into my lap, and I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. I had done what I needed to do. I had filed for divorce. I had cut the ties, but the emotional weight of it all hadn't gone away, not yet. And as much as I tried to tell myself that this was the right decision, that this was the only way forward, I couldn't help but wonder if I would ever feel like myself again, if I would ever trust someone the way I had trusted her. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of something new, hope. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I was going to face it on my own terms. And for now, that would have to be enough. The sun had barely risen the next morning, casting a soft orange glow over the apartment as I sat hunched over my kitchen table, staring at a pile of legal documents and a stack of receipts. It had been a long night filled with paperwork and emails, but as I sifted through everything, one thing became clear. I was starting to piece together the truth about Tony. But it wasn't just his betrayal that had me rattled. No, the more I looked into his background, the more I realized how much darker this whole situation was than I had imagined. I had already hired a private investigator to look into Tony's finances, and what he found shook me to my core. I had been expecting some small-time con, maybe a shady past here and there, but I hadn't been ready for this. Tony wasn't just a charming guy who happened to end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was a professional scam artist, a fraud. I dug through the reports, scanning the investigators' findings. Tony's name popped up in multiple legal cases, all involving scams, theft, and debt. There were court records from years ago that detailed his involvement in a series of fraudulent schemes, phony business deals, fake investment opportunities, and a string of unpaid debts. The more I read, the more I realized how deep this went. Tony wasn't just a random man Claire had decided to be with. He was a criminal, and she had gotten tangled up in his mess. There were bankruptcy filings, eviction notices, and a long list of creditors trying to get their money back from him. But it was the latest findings that hit hardest. Tony had recently racked up a massive debt, close to $500,000, with some dangerous people. People who didn't just send letters or make phone calls to collect what was owed. These were people who made their threats very real. They used violence. They weren't just creditors. They were criminals. I felt sick. This wasn't the life I had imagined for Claire. The woman I loved, the woman who had turned away from me, had willingly stepped into this world, a world filled with danger, deceit, and destruction. My stomach churned as I read through the details of Tony's most recent run-in with the law. There had been an incident at home, something serious Claire had never talked about. Tony had clearly been the cause of it. There were no charges filed, and the story was conveniently erased from public records. Claire had been living with a man who wasn't just a liar, but someone capable of real harm. I slammed my fist down on the table, the sound echoing through the empty apartment. How could she not see this? How could she have walked straight into this? It wasn't just an affair, it was her life being sucked into a pit of lies and violence. I couldn't stand the thought of her still being with him. Claire deserved better. She deserved the life I had promised her. She deserved safety, peace, not this, whatever this was that Tony was dragging her into. The next logical step was obvious. I had to warn her. I had to make sure she knew what she was getting into. But that's when the doubt crept in. Would she even listen? Or had Tony already poisoned her mind, convinced her that everything I'd warned her about was just jealousy or control? I grabbed my phone off the table, heart hammering in my chest, as I typed out a message to Claire. I wanted to be direct, to be clear. This was no longer about us. It wasn't about fixing what was broken between us. This was about saving her from making a mistake she couldn't undo. Claire, we need to talk. I know you've chosen Tony, but you need to hear the truth about him. I've found out things about him that you don't know. Dangerous things. Please, for your own sake, listen to me. This is bigger than you think. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the send button. Was I doing the right thing? Would this even make a difference? Or would she just dismiss me as someone bitter, someone who couldn't let go? Before I could second-guess myself, I hit send. It was out there now. She would either listen to me or she wouldn't, but at least I had tried. I paced around the apartment, too restless to sit. The message was out, but my mind was still running in circles. I was already thinking ahead. What if she called? What if she showed up at my door? Would I be able to convince her? Would she even believe me? Minutes ticked by, slowly, the clock on the wall mocking me with every passing second. The phone in my hand felt heavier and heavier, as if I could physically feel the weight of the uncertainty in the air. Then, finally, the vibration I had been waiting for. I glanced at the screen. I'm not going to let you control me, Jack. I'm with Tony, and I trust him. I'm done with this, with you. Stop trying to tear me away from the life I've chosen. I'm not interested in your accusations. I read the words over and over again, as if somehow seeing them more than once would make them make sense. But they didn't. She had chosen him, and nothing I said seemed to matter. She had already made her decision, and now, in her eyes, I was just another obstacle. I felt the sting of it hit me in waves, each word she sent making me feel smaller, more insignificant. But there was something else simmering beneath the hurt: anger, determination. She might have chosen him, but I was still going to protect her. I wasn't going to let her walk into a fire without doing everything I could to pull her out. If Claire didn't want to listen, then I would make sure Tony's past caught up with him. I didn't know how, but I wasn't going to stop until I exposed him for what he truly was. The man who had turned everything I cared about into a lie. I grabbed my jacket, making a mental note to call Angela again. It wasn't over. It couldn't be. And as I stepped out into the chilly night, something in me hardened. I didn't care if Claire believed me or not. I wasn't fighting for her anymore. I was fighting for justice, for the truth, and for the peace of mind that came with knowing I'd done everything I could to save her from the man she refused to see for who he really was. This wasn't just about love anymore. It was about survival. And I wasn't going to let Tony destroy anyone else. I stood outside Tony's building again, my breath visible in the cold air, each exhale sharp as I tried to steady myself. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. Claire. Another message. Another dismissal. My mind had been a whirlwind ever since she rejected everything I had warned her about. But tonight, I was done waiting for her to make the choice. Tonight, I was going to make it for her. I had spent days uncovering Tony's past, reaching out to people who might have answers, gathering all the dirt I could find. I had enough to destroy him, to rip his world apart the way he had done to mine. But that wasn't my first instinct anymore. My first instinct was to protect Claire. The plan I had in my head wasn't just about taking down Tony, though. It was about making sure Claire understood what she was involved in. I didn't care anymore about winning her back. What mattered now was getting her away from him, away from the life he had lured her into. I pulled my coat tighter against the biting wind, stepping up to the front door of Tony's apartment. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. I was done asking for permission. I just pushed open the door and walked inside. The hallway was quiet, the light flickering overhead. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I made my way down the narrow corridor. When I reached his door, I didn't hesitate. I knocked once, hard. The sound echoed in the silent hallway, like a warning. Moments later, Tony's voice came from inside. "Who the hell?" He opened the door, and when he saw me standing there, his face shifted from confusion to a cold smile. "Well, well," Tony said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Jack, what brings you here this time? Finally figured out that I'm not going anywhere?" I didn't respond right away. Instead, I walked past him, pushing the door open with force, stepping into the small apartment. He didn't stop me. In fact, he didn't even flinch. He just stood there, watching me with that cocky grin that made my blood boil. "You think you can intimidate me?" Tony asked, crossing his arms over his chest, leaning against the doorframe. "I've seen what you're capable of. And let me tell you, you're not scaring me." I turned to face him, my jaw tight. "This isn't about scaring you, Tony," I said, my voice low and controlled. "This is about making sure you understand what happens when you destroy someone's life." Tony chuckled, his eyes narrowing. "You're talking big for someone who's already lost. You don't get it, do you? Claire made her choice, and it's not you. She's with me now, and there's nothing you can do about it." The words hit harder than I expected, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I stepped closer, ignoring the sting of his taunting. "I'm not here to talk about Claire, Tony. I'm here to talk about you." His expression faltered just for a split second before that cocky grin returned. "What about me?" "I know everything about you," I said, my voice steady but cutting through the air like a knife. "The scams, the lies, the debts. I know about the people you owe money to, the people who will come for you when you can't pay up. And let me tell you, they don't play by the rules. They don't care who you hurt in the process." Tony's smile faded, but he didn't look scared. He was calculating, his eyes flicking to the side, as if trying to figure out what game I was playing. "You think that's going to scare me?" he said, his voice growing darker. "You really think I'm afraid of some threats? You don't know who you're dealing with." I leaned in, my eyes locking onto his. "Oh, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A coward who hides behind lies and a woman's love to cover up his tracks. But I'm done playing nice. You've hurt enough people. Now it's time for you to face the consequences." Tony's gaze darkened, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. The arrogance was starting to crack, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. But he didn't back down. Instead, he took a deep breath, his voice colder now. "You think I'm afraid of some guys chasing me? You think they'll be the end of me? I've got more than you could ever imagine, Jack. You don't have the power to take me down." The words were hollow, and I could tell they were only meant to mask the growing uncertainty inside him. He was bluffing, and he knew it. "I don't need to take you down, Tony," I said quietly. "But I do need to make sure you stay away from her, from Claire. She doesn't deserve to be dragged into your mess. And if you think you can just waltz through life destroying everything in your path, then I'm going to make sure you regret it," Tony sneered. "You think you're some kind of hero now? You think you can just walk in here and fix everything? You don't have the guts to take me on. So what's your plan, Jack? You gonna run to the cops? Go cry to Claire? You've lost, man." I stood tall, my eyes never leaving his. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't just about me anymore. It's about Claire. It's about her safety. And you're going to leave her alone." He took a step forward, his posture tense, and I could see the threat in his eyes, but I wasn't backing down. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. Not now. "You think you can just tell me what to do?" Tony growled, stepping closer, his voice a low hiss. "You think I'm going to just walk away because you say so?" I didn't flinch. Instead, I took one final step toward him, my voice cold as steel. "I'm not asking you to walk away, Tony. I'm telling you, leave Claire alone." For a long moment, the room was thick with tension. Neither of us moved, and then slowly, Tony stepped back, his jaw tight. He was pissed, but I could tell he was calculating his next move. He wasn't done with this, but for tonight at least, he knew I wasn't going anywhere. "You've got a big mouth, Jack," Tony said, his voice tight with frustration. "But this isn't over. You'll regret this." I smiled, stepping back toward the door. "Maybe, but I don't think I'll regret it nearly as much as you will." I walked out without looking back. As the door closed behind me, I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot, but tonight I had made my choice, and I wasn't going to let Tony destroy Claire, or anyone else, ever again. The days after my confrontation with Tony were filled with tension, and no matter how many times I tried to reassure myself that I had done the right thing, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was unraveling. The threat of Tony and the people he was involved with loomed over me like a storm cloud, and Claire was still too deep in the middle of it all to see the danger. I was lying awake in bed one night, staring at the ceiling, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I groggily reached for it and saw the name flash across the screen. Claire. My heart lurched. I hadn't heard from her since our last conversation. I had made it clear that I wasn't going to sit idly by while she destroyed her life. But the fact that she was reaching out now, when things were more dangerous than ever, caught me off guard. I answered, my voice cautious. "Claire?" There was a long pause before she spoke, her voice shaky. "Jack, I don't know who else to turn to. I think I made a huge mistake." I sat up in bed, instantly wide awake. This wasn't the woman I knew. She wasn't just apologizing. There was fear in her voice, real fear. I felt my chest tighten. "What's going on, Claire? What's happened?" I don't know what to do," she whispered, almost as if she were trying not to be heard. "Tony, he's in trouble, and Jack, I think I'm in danger too. These people, the The call dropped off suddenly, leaving nothing but the eerie hum of the dead line. I immediately called her back, my heart pounding. It rang twice before she picked up, but this time, I could hear the panic in her voice. "Jack, I need to get out of here. I need to leave. Please help me." It was the first time I had ever heard her sound so vulnerable, so defeated. And suddenly, I understood the gravity of the situation. She wasn't calling for a second chance, or even to apologize for the betrayal. She was scared. "Claire, where are you?" I asked, the words coming out more urgently than I intended. "I'm at the apartment, but Jack, I don't think it's safe here anymore." I grabbed my coat and keys without thinking. My mind raced. She had trusted Tony, and now she was paying the price. The realization that I was her last resort hit me like a freight train. As much as I wanted to stay mad at her, to walk away from everything, I couldn't. I couldn't let her go through this alone, not when it was clear that her life was in danger. "I'm on my way," I said, already moving toward the door. "Just stay put, Claire. I'm coming to get you." I didn't wait for a response before hanging up, slamming the door behind me. The cold air hit my face as I stepped outside, the streets of the city bathed in the eerie silence of the night. But there was no time to waste, no time to question if this was the right thing to do. I was going to help her. As I drove toward her apartment, I couldn't shake the thought of the kind of danger she might be in. Tony wasn't just a guy who had cheated on me, he was dangerous, and the people he was involved with were even worse. I had seen the debt he had racked up, the people who would stop at nothing to get what they were owed. The thought of her stuck in the middle of that world made my blood run cold. I pulled up outside her apartment building, my headlights slicing through the darkness. I took a deep breath before getting out of the car, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. This wasn't just about getting her away from Tony anymore. It was about keeping her safe, no matter what. I rushed through the entrance and up to her floor, my mind still reeling from the mess everything had become. I knocked on her door, my heart thumping in my chest. But when she opened it, she was visibly shaken, her eyes wide, her hands trembling. "I can't stay here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He'll come looking for me, Jack. You don't understand. I'm scared." Without a second thought, I stepped inside and grabbed her by the arm gently. "We're leaving. You're coming with me. Now." I didn't give her a chance to argue. The look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She didn't have the strength to fight anymore. She needed me, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was doing something right. We hurried out of the building, walking fast as if the very walls might collapse on us at any moment. I could see her anxiety, the way her body seemed to tremble with each step. It was clear that she hadn't fully grasped the depth of the situation until now. She had trusted Tony, had believed the lies, and now she was standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure of how to climb back. As we reached the car, I opened the door for her, but before I could get in myself, I heard a noise, a car engine revving loudly, tires screeching around the corner. I spun around, my heart racing. There, at the end of the street, was a black SUV I didn't recognize, its headlights blinding in the distance. "Jack!" Claire gasped, her voice rising in panic. "That's them! That's his people!" Without a second thought, I pushed her into the car and slammed the door shut. I could hear the SUV coming closer, the engine growling like a predator stalking its prey. The last thing I wanted was for her to be in the middle of a violent confrontation. I started the car and sped off, weaving through traffic, pushing the car harder than I ever had before. But I could hear the SUV behind us, tailing us at a dangerous speed. This wasn't just a random encounter. This was Tony's people, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. "Jack, what are we going to do?" Claire cried, her voice rising with fear. "We're not going to do anything," I said, my voice steady even though my pulse was racing. "I'm getting you out of here, and I'll figure out the rest later." As we raced through the streets, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't outrun them forever, but I could make sure Claire was safe, and that was all that mattered now. The road ahead was unclear, but for the first time in what felt like forever, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just protecting Claire anymore. I was taking control of the chaos Tony had dragged her into. And no matter what it took, I wasn't going to let it destroy her. We didn't speak much as we drove, the silence between us thick with both fear and uncertainty. The black SUV was still tailing us, getting closer with every sharp turn I made. I couldn't outrun them forever, but I had to buy us some time. Claire was sitting in the passenger seat, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrest, her face pale with fear. I knew she didn't fully understand how dangerous this situation had become, but I could see the realization dawning in her eyes. Tony's world wasn't just full of lies. It was full of real, brutal danger. I pushed the car harder, my eyes flicking nervously to the rearview mirror every few seconds. The SUV was closer now, its headlights blinding in the dark. I needed a plan. I couldn't keep running forever. I had to find a way to fight back, to protect Claire before it was too late. "Jack," Claire's voice was shaky. "What do we do? They're gaining on us." I gritted my teeth, glancing in the rear view again. "We need to get somewhere they can't follow. I'm thinking the old warehouse district, down by the docks. It's the only place I know that's secluded enough." She looked at me, fear in her eyes. "The docks? Jack, you're not seriously—" "I'm serious," I cut her off, my tone sharp. I couldn't afford hesitation anymore. "They won't follow us in there. Trust me." She nodded, but the doubt in her eyes was clear. Claire had never been in a situation like this before. She had never faced a man like Tony. And now, she was caught in a mess of my own making. But I couldn't let that stop me. I couldn't let her down again. We hit the first intersection that led to the industrial part of town, the streets empty and dark, lit only by the harsh streetlights. I took a hard left, sending the car into a skid, tires screeching against the pavement. The SUV followed. Of course they did. As I approached the entrance to the old dock area, I pulled the car up to a set of abandoned buildings. My pulse was pounding in my ears. I didn't know if this would work. I didn't know if we could lose them, but I had to try. I parked behind an old warehouse, hoping the darkness would hide us long enough to figure out our next move. I grabbed the keys from the ignition, my hands shaking as I tried to calm myself. "Stay here," I said, turning to Claire. "I'm going to check the back exit." She didn't respond immediately, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. I could see how torn she was between staying put and coming with me. But finally, she just nodded, her lips pressed tightly together. I got out of the car, taking a moment to check the surroundings. The old warehouses were dark and empty, their rusted doors creaking in the wind. There was a metal fence running along the perimeter, blocking off the area from the road. But there was a gate, and I was pretty sure it wasn't locked. I moved quickly, scanning the area for any sign of movement. The last thing I wanted was to be caught off guard, but all was quiet. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. Someone was waiting for the moment to strike. I reached the back of the building and tried the gate. It was unlocked, just as I thought. My heart rate quickened as I pulled it open, just enough to slip through without making a sound. Behind me, the sound of tires screeching reached my ears. They were here, the SUV. I ran back to the car, my thoughts a blur as I reached the door and yanked it open. "We need to move, now," I said to Claire, urgency in my voice. She looked up, startled, as if she hadn't heard the car approach. "Jack, what's happening?" "They're right behind us," I said, pulling her toward the back gate. "I don't have time to explain. Just trust me." I could hear the engine growling closer, the headlights blinding us even in the darkness. It was too close. We didn't have much time. We ran down the alley, the cold air biting at my skin, my muscles burning from the effort. Claire was right beside me, her breath coming in quick bursts. We passed the back of the building and into the next alleyway, the noise of the pursuing car growing louder. And then, just as we reached the end of the alley, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car door opening. I turned around, my heart in my throat, only to see a figure stepping out from behind the SUV. It was Leo, Tony's contact, the guy who made sure things got done. I had heard about him, but I never expected to face him in person. I stopped dead in my tracks, feeling my pulse spike. Leo wasn't alone. There were two others with him, both wearing black jackets and standing with an air of danger that sent chills down my spine. Leo's eyes locked onto mine, his lips curling into a cruel grin. "Thought you could run from us, huh, Jack?" he called, his voice low and menacing. "You've got nowhere to go." I took a step back, instinctively pulling Claire closer to me. She was breathing heavily, her face pale with fear. "Get in the car," I said, my voice steady despite the panic I felt inside. "I'll handle this." "What?" Claire's voice wavered with disbelief. "Jack, no, we have to go." But I couldn't leave without one last piece of the puzzle, the one thing that could keep Tony from ever coming after us again, the one thing that would make him pay for everything. I turned to face Leo. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice low and determined. "You're not going to get away with this." Leo's grin faded slightly, his eyes narrowing as he saw the resolve in my stance. "You think you're in control here?" he asked, stepping closer. "You're in way over your head, Jack. This is bigger than you." "I'm not backing down," I said firmly. And then, without warning, I grabbed the bag from Claire's hand and pulled her toward the back exit, hoping to use the distraction to our advantage. But Leo was faster than I expected. One of his men rushed forward, grabbing my arm, spinning me around. "You think you can just walk away?" he spat. I struggled against his grip, adrenaline flooding my system. "Get off me!" I growled, twisting free with a burst of strength. "Get out of our way!" I turned to Claire, who was frozen in fear, her eyes wide. "Go! Now!" I could see it in her eyes, the fear, the uncertainty, the disbelief that she was caught up in something like this. But for once she listened. She didn't hesitate. She ran, and I followed her. We didn't stop. Not until we reached the old warehouse district's gates. We didn't look back. I knew we still had a long road ahead of us. We hadn't won yet, and there was still so much to be done. But tonight, we'd taken the first step. And in that moment, that was all that mattered. I wasn't going to let Tony or his people take anything else from me. Not Claire. Not my life. Not anymore. The night was quiet as I sat at the edge of the bed in the small cabin I had rented for Claire and me. It was a far cry from the life we had once shared, but it was the safest place I could think of. The secluded location, miles away from Tony and his people, felt like a temporary sanctuary. It was a place where we could breathe, where I could think clearly again, even if just for a few hours. Claire was sitting on the other side of the room, still shaken, her eyes distant as she stared at the floor. I knew she was scared, and it broke my heart to see her like this. The woman who had once been full of life, full of love, was now a ghost of herself. She had been dragged into Tony's mess, and now there was no turning back. I had told her we needed to lay low for a while, but I couldn't help the rage that was still simmering beneath my skin. Tony hadn't just hurt me. He had dragged Claire into a world she didn't understand, and now he was paying the price. I had sent the evidence, photos, documents, the entire mess of Tony's criminal activities, to a few trusted contacts. It wasn't going to be long before everything came crashing down for him. I stood up and walked over to Claire, sitting next to her on the bed. She flinched at first, but then she let out a long, shaky breath and allowed herself to relax. "Claire," I said, my voice softer than it had been. "I'm sorry. I know you're scared, but we're safe. You're safe now. I promise." She looked at me, her eyes red from crying, her face pale and drawn. It wasn't the woman I had loved. It wasn't the woman I had fought for. She looked broken. "I don't know how I got here, Jack," she whispered, her voice raw. "How did I not see what he was? How did I let him pull me into all of this?" I reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You weren't the one who messed up, Claire. Tony did this. He's the one who lied to you, who manipulated you. It's not your fault." Her gaze dropped, but there was still that hint of doubt in her eyes. I could see the weight of regret hanging over her like a dark cloud, and it hurt to see it. "I should have seen it earlier. I should have known," she continued, almost as if to herself. "He was never what he seemed. I was so blind." I shook my head. "You trusted him. You believed in something, Claire. You wanted to believe that there was more to him, but you're not the only one who's been fooled. I was too. I trusted you." The words felt harsh as they left my mouth, but they were the truth. They were the raw feelings that had been eating at me for weeks. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said quietly, the guilt in her voice heavier than I'd heard it before. I don't know what happened. I got lost in him, Jack. I thought he was different. I thought he cared." I let out a slow breath, standing up and walking to the window. The moonlight filtered in, casting long shadows across the cabin. "He didn't care. He never did. Not about you, not about anyone. He used you, and now we're dealing with the mess he left behind." Claire remained silent, and I could feel the tension building in the room. It was like the air itself was thick with everything unsaid, everything that had been building up between us for days. Finally, she stood up, walking over to me. I didn't turn around, but I could feel her presence behind me. "Jack," she began, her voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I never meant for any of this to happen. I should have been better. I should have known." I turned slowly to face her, seeing the tears welling up in her eyes. She was breaking down, and I could see it. The woman I had once loved was gone, replaced by someone who was caught in a mess she didn't know how to get out of. "I don't know if I can forgive you right now, Claire," I said, my voice quieter, softer. "I don't know if I even can. But I'm still here, and I'm still trying to help you through this. That's all I can offer." She nodded, looking down, as though the weight of her own actions was too much for her to carry. She opened her mouth to say something, but then closed it again, unsure of what to say next. "Don't say anything more right now," I said, holding up a hand to stop her. "We're not there yet, but right now, we're safe. That's what matters." The silence that followed was thick, each of us stuck in our own thoughts. I couldn't deny how much I had been hurt, how much I still felt the sting of everything that had happened. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to walk away from Claire, not yet. Not until I knew she was out of this mess. Not until I could figure out what the hell we were going to do next. I walked over to the door, glancing at her one last time before stepping outside. The air was crisp, and the quiet of the night was a welcome change from the chaos of the past few days. I needed to get in touch with my contacts. I needed to move fast before Tony's debts caught up with him and put Claire in even more danger. He wasn't going to stop until he got what he wanted, but I wasn't going to let him win. The next few hours would be crucial. We needed to get out of here before it was too late. I had a plan, but it required one final piece: taking down Tony once and for all. As I pulled my phone from my pocket, I texted Leo's number, asking for a meeting. I didn't know if this was going to be the last move or just another step in the war, but I wasn't leaving without ending it. Not for Claire, not for me, for both of us.